Have you ever looked back at a moment in your life and thought, how could I have not seen it? Or even worse, how could I have stayed? Well, this episode is about those moments that we have a hard time forgiving ourselves for. And we're going to dive into the truth about self forgiveness, and it might not be what you think.
1, 2.
Welcome to Authenticity Lab. This is season 2 of the podcast, where we explore how to thrive in uncertainty. I'm Dr. Kelsey Miles. I'm a musician, songwriter, and a chemistry professor. Each week, I share a new life story, and I break it down using the scientific method. You see, I use music and science to understand my world within and the world around me. And by the end of today's episode, my hope is that you'll feel more free. You'll be able to look at your past more clearly and give yourself the forgiveness you've been waiting for. Making mistakes in life is very normal, and we're all aware of this, but it's not really the mistake that's the bad part. The mistake is just the beginning of this avalanche of emotions that often come up. And for me, it's often like shame and guilt. Not only did I make the mistake, but then I shame myself for being bad, that I made it, and then I feel guilty for doing bad. And it's this combination that makes it really tricky to even explore the idea of forgiving ourselves. And we often then think forgiveness can only be given if we fix the mistake that we made. So essentially, we're just shaming and guilting ourselves because of the mistake, which makes it even harder to fix it. So it's just this, like I said, an avalanche of not great feelings the whole time. So then what we do, if you're anything like me, you put it in a box and you shove it away and you don't think about it anymore. But the truth is that box is what you carry around with you every day. And true self-forgiveness is only available when you open that box and accept what actually happened. And this ties in perfectly with my song, Beautiful Mistake. This song is going to be introduced every episode this month where we're working on calibration, calibrating our own ideas and perceptions about things that have happened in our lives. Let me share a story of where I've recently forgiven myself for a mistake, a big mistake that I have carried around for a very long time. In my early 20s, I entered a relationship with a man that was much older than me. He was 22 or 23 years older than me. And the relationship ended up being very controlling, and it was abusive, both emotionally and physically. And I say this to share the weight that this had held for me for a long time. And I didn't see it at the time. It was like I started to recognize what was going on. And instead of pulling out, I leaned more in. I gave more hope. I kept choosing to love. And for a long time, blame myself around this relationship. In this relationship, I contorted myself to fit exactly what this person wanted, and the goalpost kept moving and kept moving and kept moving. It was never enough. And it absolutely drained me. I turned into I completely lost myself. The controlling aspect really showed up in my other relationships. I ended up severing relationships with my family and my friends. And a lot of this was on purpose. You know, when someone wants to control you, they manipulate you into thinking certain things. And at the time, I really thought I was the one actively making these decisions. And I was. I was actively making the mistakes. And I can also see where I was being manipulated to do so. But it still was my choice. It was still my choice to pull away from my family and my friends. And if you can see in this story, imagine yourself in my shoes. And maybe I hope you haven't had something like this happen to you. But in this case, I knew I was actively making those choices. And also knowing that if I didn't, things would be way worse. And so I was really stuck. I essentially kept choosing this person over myself, consistently betraying myself again and again and again. And when I finally had the courage to leave the relationship with the help of a therapist, I entered a place in my life where I didn't trust anyone then. Because not only could I not trust someone that I introduced into my own life, but I couldn't trust myself because I had just made all of those self-betrayal decisions. I mean, this mistake absolutely affected me in a way that it's touched every relationship I've had since. Very, very negatively impacted me. And all the while in that relationship, by me pouring more into it and I just had so much hope. I just kept trying to see the good that was happening. And this really ties into my lyric in Beautiful Mistake. I imagined a beautiful masterpiece, an infallible vision just waiting to be released.
Imagine a beautiful masterpiece, an infallible vision just waiting to be released.
I really thought I was doing the right thing. I really thought by keep giving love to someone, they would change or they would stop hurting me. And that wasn't the case at all. And this left me really, really broken. And I really blame myself from this. Although the choices I was making were from a place of being manipulated by someone else, they were still my mistakes to separate from my family, to separate from my friends, to continually betray myself and not stand up for myself. So it makes sense that after this relationship, I didn't trust myself or anyone else around me. And I also felt really guilty. I felt so guilty that I had made this mistake, that I had gotten myself caught up in that. I was this smart young woman. I was getting my undergraduate degree in chemistry. I worked at the Air Force Base in a research lab. I was not stupid, So I felt so guilty for making such a bad mistake and continually making it for 4 years. 4 years. And I also then felt shame because I felt so bad. I just felt like I was bad. Not only did I do something bad, I made a mistake, but I am bad. And that combination of shame and guilt, it's very, very difficult to tease out and to separate yourself from something like that. So, what did I do? I took that situation, I got out of it, but I still carried that really heavy box around. And throughout, my life since then, I've opened it and worked on organizing it. And I'd like to say, as of today, or as of recently, I feel the most at peace with it. It's taken a lot of effort for me to accept what happened and forgive myself. So, I want to break this story down using the scientific method because I want to show you how my conclusion of I can't trust anyone was real in the moment. But once I calibrated, which is what this month is about, once I calibrated, I can now draw a new conclusion that is healthier and also has a layer of self forgiveness. My hypothesis was, that, well, if I just love this person more, then maybe it will get better. And so that's the experiment I kept running over and over and over again. And the data I collected was a little all over the place, but I had enough data that said that it was, not too bad, not too bad. Eventually, I had enough experiments that gave me the data that said, this is not going anywhere. This is getting worse. This isn't me. I don't feel like me. And I was really fortunate to have a great therapist. They helped me get out of it. by working through talking to this person in like mock conversations and helping me understand how I got there. And so when I left the relationship, my conclusion was that I can't trust anyone. And my conclusion was that I am bad. I have so much shame and guilt for doing that. And that was kind of where it ended. And that affected me for a long time and still does to this day. I think we underestimate how much relationships can affect us. And until you feel really at peace with something, you really haven't forgiven yourself or that whole situation and really incorporated it and accepted it. And so I feel pretty great about it now, recognizing the reality of the situation. So in time, I have worked on myself and, I've started this podcast and I've done tons of calibration and really deep dives with music. And I've come to realize that I can draw a different conclusion. And the conclusion that I want to draw, rather than I can't trust anyone and I should feel shame and guilt, is first off, I did notice things were off. I just didn't take action on it until lots of years had passed. And so it's not true. That conclusion of I can't trust myself or others, that's not true. The truth is I just need to get better at taking action when I hear my intuition speak up. So that's one reframe of the conclusion. Another reframe for the shame and guilt is that I'm not inherently bad just because I make a mistake. Really sitting with that, really feeling that I'm not bad for doing that. That took a lot of work to get there. It took me doing other life experiments to kind of gain that confidence. But one thing I want to share is it is essentially a choice. I did choose to shame myself, and I did choose to feel guilty. And both of those were a choice that I made. By honoring the fact that I did choose both of those, and by really accepting that that wasn't handed to me, that was something I chose, radical self-acceptance of what I chose, actually helped me realize, well, if I could choose shame and guilt for a mistake, that means I can also choose the opposite. And that door is always open. It seems like it's not. But when you really think about it, if you can choose one thing, that means you can choose another. And so as I look at it now, I choose to not feel shame and to not feel guilt for those mistakes that I made. I was doing my best with what I had. I really was. Now, this mistake that I made, there is no way that I could turn back time and fix it. My relationships with family and friends that fell apart because of this, I could mend, but they were affected. And so there's nothing that can really erase this quote unquote mistake that I made. And so the forgiveness didn't come from me fixing it. It didn't come from me finding a relationship and proving to myself that I could trust someone. That didn't even come then. It didn't come from me just pushing it away and deciding to not trust anyone. The forgiveness only came when I opened the box and really accepted everything that happened. And when you really do that, it is freaking scary. It is no fun because you'll go through ideas about how you aren't good enough and that you are terrible, and shame and guilt like to pop up when you open that box. And so it's important, I think, to share that because I don't want you to think that, this healing journey is, I'm just going to open this box of this really traumatic event and then self-forgiveness will come. I wish that was the case. I've talked about a magic wand on this podcast before, but that's not how it works. You don't know what's in the box. That's why you closed it up. That's why it's scary. That's why it's really hard to open it. And so the only thing I can offer is just give yourself grace when you start opening it and recognize that every emotion that comes through, accept it. It is a real thing. It's a real emotion. Now, you don't have to react to it. The emotions of shame and guilt were there. They were telling me something. And what they were telling me was that I was the one making that mistake even worse than what it was. In a way, we don't forgive ourselves because we think if we do, we might make the mistake again. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's important. We think that if we forgive ourselves, we might make that mistake again. So if we don't forgive ourselves, we can be sure it'll never happen. And I'm telling you, that's not how it works. You actually create way more hurt in yourself by doing that. What happens is that requires you to carry around the heavy box of shame, the heavy box of guilt, and everything that you don't want to look at because you're afraid to make the same mistake again. If instead, I accept that I made the mistake and I accept everything that happened and the friends and family, those relationships that I severed, and I accept that it happened and I witness the emotions. I'm just observing the emotions coming up. And I say, I hear you. I hear you. The shame and guilt will feel heard. And you'll find within you something that says, and I did my best though. What else was I supposed to do? And it's in that moment that you can really switch the idea you've had around that mistake. Instead of the mistake being so heavy, you recognize that you can actually give yourself some grace with it. Not something fake. Not this fake, oh, just remind yourself you love yourself. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about real acceptance of what happened. Accepting all of it. That's the path to self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness cannot grow where there is shame and guilt. Self-forgiveness can only grow from a place where you fully accept everything that happened the way it was. It's not that I'm making everything okay that happened. I'm literally saying, I hate that that happened, and I feel like it's a mistake, and I forgive myself for doing it. Do you see how that's different than just trying to make something feel okay? It's not superficial. It's very deep. You've really opened the box, accepting everything. Accepting everything. That's where self-forgiveness comes from. And making peace with it. I encourage you to use the word "and" when you talk about this kind of stuff or when you're reflecting on it. Instead of saying something like, I made that mistake where I severed, my relationships with my friends, but they were manipulating me. That's going to keep you from getting to the full truth of it and fully accepting it and fully making peace with it. Instead say, I severed the relationship with friends and that person manipulated me. Both can be true. Try not to find blame, instead acceptance. All right, it's your turn for this week's calibration moment. We are in the calibration phase of the Calibrate, Experiment, Optimize. Our first season was all about experimentation, and I realized we really needed to adjust and just fine-tune our perceptions about things in our lives. So what's something in your life that you feel like was a mistake and you still haven't forgiven yourself for? Something that you feel some shame around, something that you don't really like talking about, something that has had no resolute ending or no closure to it within. What is that thing? Can you take some time this week and meet the version of yourself who made that quote unquote mistake and just sit with it with compassion and let it know that you see exactly what happened. Let it know that you see exactly what happened. See what comes up. Maybe you will feel some shame and guilt for it. Allow those emotions to pop up and surface. See what they say to you. Perhaps what it's asking you to do is to recognize everything around that situation. And you'll notice that it's not fun going through it, opening the box, but on the other end, all of a sudden the box gets a lot lighter. And you might find that you actually forgive yourself for making the mistake. And the craziest part is you let go of the need to fix it. You let go of the idea that it is unforgivable because it's not fixed. It happened. And it made you who you are. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear what you think. And also, if you're working on any self-forgiveness, shoot me an email at kelsey@kelseymiles.com. And also share this with a friend or a family member you think would also benefit from this. Also, I'm excited to announce that I'm doing a group call next week. The Google form is in the description of this podcast episode where you can let me know your email address and also when you can meet. Thank you so much for tuning into Authenticity Lab Season 2, Thrive in Uncertainty. I'll be back next week with a new life story to inspire you to live boldly, lead with curiosity, so you can keep being your most amazing authentic self.
I cannot change it, no, so I will embrace it, my beautiful mistake.